Hello, welcome back. In our last video, we have recorded our first VUGen script, and the script is looking like this. We have went to the Moodle homepage and then we log in and then we give the user ID password and submit the form, and then we move to the test course and log out. So there are 5 activities, or there are 5 C APIs that VUGen gave us in the script. So this is how it works. Okay, so this is your browser, and then VUGen basically sits between the client and the server, and then so listen to traffic, and then it generate. Okay, and then the code generation can happen in two ways. One is called HTML mode, and number two is called URL mode. Okay, so by default is generate in HTML mode. However, sometime we need to move to the URL mode. In this video, my goal is to explain you this HTML mode and URL mode, and give you an idea how this HTML mode and URL mode differ. Okay, but remember that the traffic, whatever is listened, that is there. So this is constant, and what we can do, we can regenerate the script in URL mode. By default we have HTML mode, we can regenerate in URL mode, or you can even go and re-record using recording option to, by changing the recording option to URL based script, you can you can record it. Okay, this is by default is HTML mode, and it's very compact and it's very readable. Okay, and let's see if we can generate the script using URL mode, and go to this URL based script and do OK and say OK, and it is now regenerating the VUser script. So this is essentially reading the traffic and regenerating the same thing in URL mode. So basically this is the script. So now what I have done, I have created two more scripts by doing this regeneration. One is URL mode recording and the second one is HTML mode recording. HTML mode recording is exactly same as the demo script. Alright, so let's see what are the difference. If you go to the URL based recording, so first one call is web URL, and then then it is doing a lot of request to get the JavaScript file, image files, and so on. Whereas in case of our HTML mode recording, if you go to the action, everything was happening as a part of extra res. Okay, so that is that is one different. And if you see, in case of URL mode recording, whenever we are going to go to this login, okay, so this is the login URL, this is the login request in case of URL mode recording. In case of HTML mode recording, the login like this. So login was generated by something called web underscore link in HTML mode. In URL mode, it is web URL, and you are giving the direct URL path. So what is happening here in case of HTML mode? So we are getting the front page. Okay, and the front page is going to look like this, and then we are seeing there is something a login link. So what happened exactly is VUGen whenever it's going to run, it is going to execute the first step, and then it will parse the response of this page, and the response of this page is basically this URL, so this HTML page, and in this HTML page it will find a link called login, and then in the second step is going to click on that login. Whereas in case of URL mode recording, whereas in case of URL mode recording, it's just going to directly go to this URL. Okay, so essentially what is happening in case of HTML mode recording, so this is the step 1 and then step 2. So step 1 and step 2 are dependent. That means if for whatever reason, if the step 1 is failed, that means it is not going to find the login link here. Okay, if it's not going to find the login link there, then the step 2, which is doing this web link login, is going to fail. Okay, so that is what exactly is going to happen here in case of HTML mode. But in case of URL mode, since we are directly accessing this URL So that's why even if the step 1 fails in URL mode, if the step 1 fails, then still step 2 can work. So what does it mean? This is called context sensitive. So why it's called context sensitive? Because VueGen at runtime parses the result of the step 1 and take the next action, whereas the step 1 and step 2 are completely independent and they are context insensitive. And another thing that you must be knowing, that since VueGen is trying to parse the intermediary steps, so therefore if you run in HTML mode, it will be more CPU intensive and memory intensive, because it will take more CPU and more memory as it is going to parse. Whereas in URL mode, it does not require that much CPU and memory. Another important thing is that whenever there is some hidden variable or session variables and those kind of things are there, then in HTML mode, since VueGen understanding the steps, so therefore VueGen is going to take appropriate action so that those things will not fail. But whereas in URL mode, since we are not understanding anything about, we're just bombarding the request like that, so therefore those kind of things where there is some dynamic value, it might fail. So this is the main difference between HTML mode and URL mode. Alright, and then you can see, like, on what cases we are going to do HTML mode, on what cases we are going to do URL mode. It depends. So first you start with HTML mode, and if things does not work, then VueGen automatically switches back to the URL mode. Alright, and also, like, if you want to really make a scalable script, and you should consider URL mode, and you should also take care of the correlation and all those dynamic values yourself programmatically. Alright, so this is the main difference between HTML mode and URL mode. And also, like, a couple of more things are there. Basically, the first thing is that we are accessing the first page, and also whatever associated images, so those things we are starting to get. So that means, like, if you look at a general browser, like, say, whenever you go to a web page, let's say google.com, so you get the HTML, and also you are getting the images, and then JavaScript or CSS or whatever there in that front page, you are getting that. So what browser does, browser simultaneously request all those images on a concurrent fashion. Okay, so that is what you are seeing here, that web concurrent start null means, like, starting from here until web concurrent end, so these requests are going to be accessed concurrently. So that means in URL mode, the emulation would be more realistic, just like in browser. So before I finish, so here is the main comparison between HTML and URL mode. That so script is context sensitive, whereas script is independent of step 1. Step 2 is independent of step 1. Alright, and then since virtual user generator need to parse the response to take the next action, so we need more CPU and memory on the machine on which this script is going to run. And here no parsing, therefore the CPU and memory utilization is less compared to the HTML mode recording. And HTML mode recording records user trigger HTML actions, and also all other resources like images, JavaScript, CSS are tagged under extra res. Whereas in case of a URL mode recording, we are using web concurrent start and web concurrent end, and we are emulating the better concurrency, just like in web browser. Alright, and here, like, in HTML mode, since the context resources are dynamically figured out during runtime, so therefore the script is less hard coded. And in the next video, we will see how a URL mode recording is going to fail, and we will learn a technique how to fix that. Thank you so much for your time.